We got an amazing conversation. Bri, listen, we have been in a lot of exciting moments, and I am so thrilled to be having an exciting moment with you right now because we are not just talking about soccer.
Right.
We are talking about a movie with soccer. And I mean, literally the little girl in me is getting like, oh my gosh, because there was nothing really out there for me, and then a little bit after me, you to watch, and then for young girls who look like you to see in the game. So, there's so many questions in my head. Number one, how did this even come about? And what was the process?
Sure. Okay. So it's a very interesting process because this movie was made during COVID. So I did my segment for 3 weeks in October 2020 in the Atlanta area. And it was literally one of the first productions done that were available to do during COVID. And so it was highly regimented, a lot of protocol. And it was very interesting in that regard with terms of actual filming. So the way I got the part in the first place was Chris, who is the president of the CDW Films, reached out to my people, essentially Livewire Media Relations, and my publicist, and said that he wanted to know if I would be interested in playing a professional head coach of a men's MLS type team. So this was literally 2019 when he first reached out. And we went through a process where I did a table read, which is essentially like a reading of some of the lines and the scenes for the director and for Chris over Zoom. Because at that point, the pandemic was in full steam ahead. And so nobody was flying anywhere. So we did everything on Zoom, which I think was very unique for them, the director and Chris, to do it that way. So then we did the table read. They liked me and offered me the part. And so that's what happened. And it was very, very unique for everybody because of COVID.
Okay. So a lot of things to unpack in that really quick. Number one, you're a goalkeeper.
Yes.
And a soccer player, and not an actress or an actor. And so how are you feeling about this opportunity, and what was the debut like? And at the same time, answer the fact that you were going to be the first woman of color, first woman to coach this professional league type team at, on big screen.
So initially I felt fairly confident because they weren't really asking me to stretch too much, because I was, a coach with the Washington Spirit in 2018. And so they really just wanted me to channel my experiences in that regard, but they did have me written in a role that was a little bit more serious than I probably would have done myself as a normal coach. So I had to be careful about, trying to keep my game face on basically the entire time. So that was a little bit complicated because I was having fun. So I wanted to act like I was having fun.
Hold on. I have a question. Okay. I know I asked you a couple questions and now I'm going to interrupt, but you have a serious game face. I don't know who you're talking to, but I've seen it many times.
Yes. But I was having so much fun doing the production that I was smiling all the time. And Jonathan, who is the director, had to keep reminding me that he wanted me to be serious, because the character, Coach Scurry, is the only female head coach in the league. At the time I was, my team was, good, but struggling. And I was under a lot of pressure as the only female coach in the league. So I had to depict that. And the way we decided to do that was for me to literally just be very, very serious all the time. And so it was it was more serious than I would have normally have been if I were just, basically being myself as a coach. But it wasn't too much of a stretch. I mean, I do have quite a game face, so. It worked out.
To everybody at home, FYI, Bri has lasers coming out of her eyeballs. So don't be on the wrong side of that. I'm just telling you. So,
What do you mean, B? You've never been on the wrong side of that.
well, one time kind of in particular, but we don't have to get into that right now.
We won't talk about that right now.
That's for another call.
It's only a half an hour show, so.
Yes, right. So tell me, what's I don't always like to make everything such a big deal, like in terms of the gravity, but really, I think this is a really phenomenal opportunity, not just for you personally, but I think for the viewer to be able to see. I think we're in a historic time where there's a lot of change happening. Yes. And as someone who's been in the game for so long, Brian, I honestly have just fallen in love with the idea of women being in these uncomfortable for other people positions. Yes. And to see you in this, I'm gonna cry and I'm gonna be happy. Like I'm gonna be all these things. What is the message, do you think, that's going to be come out of this for the viewer?
I think what was so neat about doing this process, B, is that both the director and the producer were very animated and very intentional about me having a powerful role as the head coach. And they wanted to make sure that the way I was portrayed would be inspiring to a lot of young girls and boys watching this movie. And so that was very reassuring for me. And I think it has the potential to really inspire some people. I mean, the story itself is inspiring, but the fact that I am the head coach of this particular team and the lead player, Jack, he's on my team. And so the fact that we are together on this is inspirational, because he's trying to, live his dream to the maximum. And I'm trying to, live my dream as the only female coach in the league. And so I think it could be very inspirational for a lot of people in a lot of different ways.
Do you think it could also be kind of the first chance for somebody to say, you know what, I wasn't really sure about it, but I can see this. I can see this as being real.
I do think so. I mean, I feel like in the real world, in the last 5 years in particular, women in actually American football, like 49ers and being assistant coaches, right, on the offensive assistant coach or the defensive assistant coach, not necessarily the head coach, but I see it could be happening in the next 5 to 10 years. And if it's starting to happen in our great game in soccer, might be the first place it happens. But I feel like it could grow into other sports that are male dominated traditionally.
I mean, there's nothing to be afraid of, I think, is what I really want to say to everybody.
Right.
Don't be afraid. We all have great qualities that we should be sharing, and there should be nothing that inhibits us because of our gender or our orientation or where we grew up or whether we have money or whatever these external things are that really don't matter. The substance of your ability is really what meritocracy basically should be the root of the day.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And the other thing too, B, real quick, is if you look in so many different movies, sports movies in particular, that where the people are allowed to have a role that's pivotal, it doesn't have to be the main role, and they are breakthrough roles. I mean, it really can inspire people, even if that person isn't the main character. And I think I hope that this movie has the potential to inspire people in that way as well.
I think that's really an interesting point, because I feel like most people have a tendency to focus on the main thing, right, and not see that there's greatness sitting right next to you sometimes, and that can be inspirational. That's really, I think that's a very valid and very lucid point. So to the film.
Yes.
I want to ask what's your favorite scene, but I also don't want any spoilers.
Okay, my favorite scene, I will say, I don't think this will spoil anything, is the locker room scene. And I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Okay. Well, we've had
Your mind can race on what that means. And
we've had many locker room moments. And let me just tell everybody out there, this is the Briana Scurry locker room. She gets out her gloves. Very, very meticulous, very focused. Like Julie Foudy, on the other hand, is like all over the place. It's like she's like just a freshly born baby giraffe. Like
that might be the best description of Julie's locker room routine I've ever heard.
Oh my gosh, so fantastic. Okay, I want you to shout out right now, so we'll get it in a couple times. Yes. When the film is, when it's available, how to get it, how to get a ticket.
Okay, so how to get a ticket is go to highexpectationsmovie.com, and what we're doing is the movie is playing nationwide on April 7th, in particular on the East Coast at 7, and I believe it's on at 7 everywhere. Yep. So do go on to highexpectationsmovie.com and be able to see in your area when the movie's playing, but it is every session is April 7th.
Excellent. Okay, yeah. So going back to something you said that the director wanted you to be more serious.
Yeah.
Right? Have this confidence, but like more serious, because you're a little bit under pressure. And right. You said that's not really the coach that I would have been like when I was coaching in 2018 with the Washington Spirit.
Right.
What kind of coach are you, and where did that come from?
I would say I'm more of a coach that is truly just fired up when something that the team has been working on clicks. And I like to show emotion, and I like to show encouragement, and I like to be encouraging, but not in a, I'm angry kind of way. And I feel like in the movie I was very serious, but more serious than I would have been in real life. And when I did coach for the Washington in 2018, I considered myself a player's coach, which is essentially, one of the girls, and still feeling like a player in my heart and not so much like an authority. And I think that in this movie, I am definitely more of an authority, and a no nonsense kind of coach, way more than I think I would be in real life. Well,
I'm really glad we're having this conversation, because as a coach now,
yes.
I think, and I hope all coaches who are listening, will think about the kind of coach that they are.
Yeah.
And see themselves as ever evolving. Like for me, it's like I never thought about what style of coach I wanted to be. I feel like I bring my passion and my baggage,
yes,
to the field. What gets me fired up, and what gets me like I'm gonna really grind down on something. But I also have the feeling of like I am a player in this situation too. And
right.
I feel like that's the joyful part.
Yes.
That's the joyful part. And I'm going to say thank you for reminding me to have to continue to share the joyful part, not just the get the stuff done part.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Is there anything about the story that you can share? Again, no spoilers, right. But that you'd like to share, and how this story might inspire young Black girls or girls of color, or just girls in general in this space. And then on the flip side, I have sons, how it might also inspire young boys and men.
So I'm gonna try to be delicate about this. So my character, Coach Scurry, was at one point in time an assistant coach with Kelsey Grammer. Kelsey Grammer is Jack's father. And so I was an assistant coach under him. And I have great respect for what he taught me. And he was very, very willing and open with sharing his expertise and his experience with me as his assistant. And I went on my own, as most head coaches, I think, should do when they share their wisdom with their assistants, and their assistants go and leave the nest and go on to, coach their own team. And the interesting part about the movie is our dynamic when we're on opposite sides of the bench now. So we're competing against each other. That's a great dynamic, and I like the way the movie plays and portrays that. And I think that's very much how I would like real life to be. You know what I mean? Like more of an ally kind of situation. And then in terms of the young men who are watching, the character of Jack in particular, this movie is about him reaching his dream through a lot of obstacles. And I think the way he carries himself, he struggles, right? And don't we all at some point in time? Yet he is still, encouraged and is still determined to, show his worth to his family and to himself. And I think that that's really, really important for young men who are watching the movie that may feel somewhat in the shadow, you know what I mean, of a father or a brother or a relative, and then finding out who they are and walking their own path.
Oh my goodness. The parent in me right now is like, I need to take my son to watch this, because then I will be crying and he'll be like, you're crazy, mom, but hopefully he gets that message. Right?
Exactly.
Going back to what you said about, I think this is a really important thing, something that I think the U.S. women's national team has really been advocates for ever since I can remember being on the national team. It's being those allies, right? It's being those allies. And it's such an interesting dynamic when you're on a team. It doesn't matter what level you're on, when there's obviously more players than there are positions. So
Right.
you are teammates and allies, but you're also adversaries because you want those starting 11 spots.
Right.
And I always found that that's with our teams, I felt we really excelled in that space.
Yeah.
And that didn't mean that the person who wasn't starting wasn't feeling like they deserved to start, or maybe even didn't have some angst about it.
Sure.
But that I think everybody was fairly compassionate about those moments. And I don't know if this is a question or a comment, just I think it's a little bit like it's such a interesting place to be in your life when you want something and yet you need to support somebody else, yet you have this internal drive.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. It's a dance, in essence, of like you said, compassion and expectation, but also respect. I mean, on the best of teams, you have a little bit of the battle within yourself, especially if you're not the one that's getting the playing time and you so deeply desire to have it. And of course you should deeply desire that, but you carry yourself in a respectful and, with integrity. And I think that what our team did, over the years and decades, really, for the most part, when you and I played in particular together, we were highly, highly competitive in training. I mean, there really wasn't a more competitive space that I've ever seen in my life, but yet a great respect, right? A great respect for, lifting all ships, essentially all of us, building and getting better and understanding for the most part, okay, it's not my time to shine now, but I will be called upon. And so often players were called upon that may not have had an opportunity. And then were they able to step up and do their part? And I think one example that I love that I always talk about is Sarah Whalen. If you recall, in '99, I knocked Michelle Akers out, and Sarah Whalen had to come into that game. And holy cow, talk about pressure, in the World Cup final. And I mean, she's filling Michelle Akers' shoes as best she can. And we're helping her do that. And that game was very, very competitive at that point. And for Sarah to come in and do the job, she could have easily just folded, but she didn't. You know what I mean? And we were lifting her up. And so I think at the end of the day, if you understand that you are all in the same boat together and you pull together, and it may not be you that's the piano player at that time, you may be carrying the piano, but there's going to be a time when you're playing it, and just understanding that difference in the two situations.
And I think honestly, this conversation for me is very heartwarming, and it's very obvious at the same time. Meaning
Yes.
that we're talking about in 2022, we've hit a historical landmark in the pay equity conversation. And yet we're still talking about equality, and we're still talking about these things like, I mean, the way we just talked about that to me seems so rational and so obvious.
Right.
How do you see us continuing to make these big advances? Or when people say things like, oh, the first Black woman to blah, 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 I said, I never want to have this conversation again. And I don't want that to be misinterpreted.
Right.
Or I don't like having the conversation. What I'm saying is, I look forward to the day when we don't have to have this conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely understand how you mean that. And I completely agree with you. You know, you and I have been fighting this battle since it's been, 30, 40 years. You know what I mean? And we're still doing it. And for an example to look at that we aspire to be, tennis, right? Women's tennis, men's tennis, all the four majors have the same purse. That's what you mean when you say, I don't want to have to talk about it anymore, because it's set in stone and it's done, and it's a done deal. And so every year, those four tournaments are played, the purses are equal. That's what you mean when you say that. You're not saying that you're sick and tired of fighting it and you won't do it anymore. It's just that you want to get to the point where you don't have to talk about that particular thing anymore. And so I'm hoping we're almost there. I know CP is working hard on it.
Yeah, and CP being Cindy Parlow-Cohn, just in case, if you're not in that inner circle of CP world.
Yes.
Okay, I just have to say again, April 7th at 7 p.m., no matter what time zone you are, one time only. If I had flashing lights, I'd do them. highexpectationsmovie.com. Get your ticket to see the movie. Briana Scurry, in her debut role as a head coach of a MLS type team.
Yes.
Fantastic. So how do we continue to make strides in this pay equity, equality space? Because I remember, and you say, look, we've been doing this for a long time. We wanted respectable similarity, because the divide was so big before. It was just so big. And now I think we're obviously beyond that, right? We believe that equality in the pay is critical to, I think, honestly, not just the person, for me, feeling the value that I bring to an organization, but really to, dare I do say, and I think soccer is a wonderful representation of the world.
Right.
To the world, and the value of people as humans.
Yes.
And, what's that next step if you're looking into the future? Because people ask me all the time, and I'm happy to ask someone else for a change. What is it? What's the next step?
That is the age-old question, right? I feel like women's soccer players on the national team, the couple of hundred of us that have, been out front on some things with regards to this, we will continue to do our part. And what I hope is that we can continue to inspire other women in other fields, for example, like entertainment and music and, nursing and business, to step up and potentially, make their voices heard and what they deserve to have. And it shouldn't be, you work, extra time just to get equal to what a male makes. I think the next battle for us in our lane, if you will, of women's soccer is, the current CBA, I think. And that's obviously you and I aren't involved in that, but I think that's the next shoe to drop, if you will. And if that can get handled, I think that's a start. But I heard the most, and Julie Foudy was there with me when we were at the White House recently for the Equal Pay White House Summit, and Vice President Kamala Harris was speaking to us. She said it so eloquently. She's like, women have always had to continue to fight. You're always going to have to battle to maintain and then to advance. And I think that's just unfortunately how it's going to be. But what I hope we can do, you and I, for example, is just to continue to inspire and to help young girls understand their value and to know that it's okay to negotiate for more, because you are worth more. It's okay. I think that's one thing that's very intriguing to me. That's the difference between how men view negotiations and how a lot of women view it. Is men oftentimes feel like it's just part of what they do. Of course, they're going to go into that meeting, negotiate for more, whereas women sometimes are a little bit leery and afraid of how they're going to be perceived in that way. But just for women to go in there and know that they are worth what they feel they're worth.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? We are at our end of our conversation, but I want to just say two things. Number one, Coach Scurry, it is a pleasure talking to you. That is awesome. I'm so happy for you.
Thank you.
To your point and Vice President Kamala's point about, women having to continue to maintain this, I'm going to say fight, I'm going to say journey, I'm going to say, what I do like about it, however, Bri, is that there's no complacency in a woman.
Right.
And I believe that is part of our superpower. And so I hope to everybody listening to see that a woman is never complacent in where she is. She's constantly working. And I feel I have goosebumps. I feel like I've learned that from being your teammate. I've learned that from being on teams. I've learned that from hearing what other people said they thought I should be. And I'm always thinking, no, I belong over there.
Right.
And I always believe that.
Yes.
And so because I had a strong woman in my mother in my life, I live that every day. I saw that every day. And so to your point about continuing to be the inspiration, we all can do that. It doesn't matter what position you hold, where you come from, the accent you have in your voice, you are an inspiration.
Yes.
And you should always stand up for yourself, and you will stand up on April 7th at 7 p.m. But before then, you will go to highexpectationsmovie.com and you will buy a ticket to see this wonderful film. It's a one-time only.
Yes.
One time only. Do not miss it. And Briana, love you.
Love you too, B. Always a pleasure.
Awesome.
Thank you.
You got it.
All right. Take care.
All right. You too.
All right. Bye-bye.